honeymoon destination program. All right, so welcome back to AM Talk Sport, and I'm your host Ajay Menon, and with me I have a very special guest today. I have Kaustubh Pandey, football writer, editor-in-chief of Get Italian Football News, and of course he's been featured on many articles, many websites with his articles. You know, BBC Sport, Football Italia, Al Jazeera. The man's been there, done that. Kaustubh, welcome, man. Welcome to the chat.
Thanks a lot, Ajay. Thanks for having me. And it's like we don't talk culture too much out there, as we
Yeah.
just mentioned before we started off. But yeah, always good to talk Italian football specifically.
100%, man. 100%. I mean, in my 20 odd years supporting Roma, I've met a handful of people who speak the
Yeah.
same language as me when it comes to calcio. And you're one of them. You're an exception because you support Man United, but you still are heavily invested in Italian football. I want to know why.
I mean, one reason is probably that I work in Serie A, basically. I mean, I work in Italian football, not Serie A, which means I have to cover it. But secondly, I'm slowly starting to gravitate away from the Premier League because I feel it's too sanitized. I mean, I tweet about it a lot. You probably must have seen it online.
Yep, yep,
And I feel that the Premier League is very sanitized. I mean, and sanitization is good sometimes because considering the problems that the English footballing structure faced back in the 90s and 80s, it's
right.
good. But I feel Italian football is very raw. It's I wouldn't call it pure football in a way because it's not pure. There's certain elements that shouldn't be there. But I
Yeah,
find it to be chaotically beautiful in a way. I mean, I enjoy it. Whereas the Premier League seems to be very much like a luxurious product, which I'm slowly starting to gravitate away from, despite being a United fan, as you mentioned. I do watch United games, but that's pretty much it now. I mean, 5, 6 years ago, if you would have asked me this question, I would have been watching pretty much every single Premier League game. I don't. The only Premier League games I watch now are United games and Ange Postecoglou's football at
Spurs.
Tottenham Hotspur. That's pretty much it. But otherwise, it's just Serie A.
Just before we get into today's topic, just wanted to mention. I mean, to those who are listening, in 2017, I paid 90 euros for a VIP ticket at the
Exactly.
Stadio Olimpico to watch Francesco Totti play for the last time, and that 90 euros included, wine, food, and a seat behind Aldair. They were sitting ahead, rather. I was sitting behind Aldair and Simone Perotta.
Yeah.
And in 2018, I paid 120 pounds for a Chelsea Arsenal game where I was right at the back. Nothing of that
Exactly.
sorts. So I can totally get where you're coming from, man. I mean, it's real. The it is very heavily sanitized, and there is no
Yeah.
choreography. There's no tifos. There's no
Yeah.
flares.
Exactly.
There are no
I
people with
mean, people are sitting way too far apart from each other as well. They're like, especially stadiums like West Ham, who had this brilliant ball line ground
correct,
before what
correct. Upton
2016.
Park, yeah,
Yeah, and it changed into London Stadium, which is like an Olympic stadium, which is where the pitch is far apart from where the players are actually playing the game. I mean, it's ironic because that's what happens at the Olympico as well sometimes, but
yeah.
it's a completely different experience where at the London Stadium, people are, separated. They're sitting far apart from each other, where there's a limited sense of community, I believe.
True, true. So, let's just deep dive into the first topic of discussion, an incident that actually was quite shocking. And since I'm a Romanista, I was watching the game live, and it was a cause for concern because Evan Endika just collapsed on the pitch. Thankfully, better sense prevailed. They called off the game. Massive plaudits to Udinese and their management, their players, everybody. Did you watch this happen? Did you watch this unfold? And what were your thoughts?
I, there's this pattern that whenever there's something major taking place in Serie A, be it Napoli sacking their manager or the incident that we're talking about, I wasn't around to watch it live. I mean, I'm glad I couldn't watch this one live, and I checked online as to whether the game's going on, and it said suspended on Google. It mentioned
Yeah,
suspended, and I wondered, it can't rain. I mean, it can't rain in Italy at this point.
yeah,
because this
At the
is not
stadium.
Manchester or London or something. And then I checked Twitter because I wanted to put out an update on the Get Italian Football News Twitter. And then I realized someone, I think it was James Horncastle, who's really good at what he does, who
Yeah,
posted that this has happened. And then I realized that we need to um, keep tabs on what's going on. And that's how I actually realized. And I'm actually glad I didn't watch it live, because I remember watching the Christian Eriksen incident and it froze me, because Eriksen at one point was one of my favorite players. At that point, I mean, he was probably my favorite player when he was at Tottenham Hotspur.
yeah.
And it's like that incident completely changed the way I look at football as well. And I'm glad I couldn't watch it, and I was only looking at it in hindsight. And you know, maybe ten minutes later, I came across what exactly happened. But yeah, I mean, we'll probably speak about this topic as well later. In that, I believe players play too many games, which is something that Maurizio Sarri, who's ironically enough
Yeah,
is a former Lazio manager, and a lot
yeah,
of fans mentioned that he's moaning or giving these excuses which he shouldn't be giving when Lazio weren't actually winning games.
yeah.
When every single time he said that, he was speaking facts. He was constantly mentioning about how players play too many games and how it's impacting player health, the quality of football on display. And we see
Yeah.
that too often. We see young players picking up ACL injuries. We see these updates about ACL injuries about pretty much once every week, and that's
Right,
probably an
right.
understatement as well. I think it comes down to that, and I mean, unfortunately enough, we might see more of these things happen. I mean, we obviously don't want to, but the direction in which the game's going, I mean, unfortunately enough, it might well happen.
Correct. I mean, you had a World Cup in the middle of a
Yeah,
football league calendar. You have an expanded World Cup now coming up in 26. So Eric Cantona, when he made that speech, I remember watching it live,
yeah,
and
same.
it was brilliant, man. I mean, this guy has seen the future,
Yeah,
and all those years back, he rightly said that probably you will have machines who play, and
yeah.
humans will be replaced
That's
by
actually
machines
my theory,
because
by the way.
true,
Where
true, it is quite
I'm not
scary,
sure if you
and
remember that Nike ad. I think it was the Nike ad. I'm not sure if it was an Adidas ad where uh, robots played football. I think it was
yeah,
pre 2014 World Cup. My theory
right,
is that
right.
will probably happen at some point.
Yeah, man, you never know. It could happen, and the way that modern footballers are stressed. You look at Thibaut Courtois also. He said that, and he had an ACL injury,
Yeah,
came back and got injured again, and again from a Roma perspective, we've seen so many ACL tears
yep,
over the last 5, 6 odd years. So many players who've got double ACL tears on both their legs, and
yeah,
their careers have never been the same. I mean, Florenzi was,
yep,
such a
exactly.
promising talent. Kevin Strootman being
Mm,
another talent, like he could have been the best box-to-box midfielder for the Dutch national
yep.
team, but two ACLs, has completely ruined him. So too much football, man. I mean, I honestly believe I don't know where the Super League is going to come in and how many games these players are going to play, but to some extent, someone has to come in and put a stop to it, and just revert to some kind of normalcy. One can
Yeah, I
say.
mean, yeah. I mean, it's like even without the Super League, I mean, from next season onwards, they're going to play about I mean, especially the teams at the very top. They'll probably be playing what 6, 7 games or maybe more games extra because of the new Champions League format.
Right,
And then you
right.
have the what that Club World Cup thing, which starts in 2025, which
Oh yeah,
will
even that's
actually
an
go on.
expanded one, right?
Yeah,
The
so
Club
that
World
will
Cup. Oh,
go on from from July till August, something like that. It will go on for 2 months, and it will make sure that teams play preseason friendlies, then play the Club World
right.
Cup, and then start their actual season. And then they'll play extra Champions League games on top of that as well, which is
Wow.
incredibly weird. So there is a chance that footballers could actually be playing. I mean, a fit footballer could actually be playing over 60 games a season, and that's like
Insane.
minimum. So if a team
Insane.
actually qualifies for the next round of the Champions League, they could be
Yeah.
playing over 70 games, and then they're playing. There's international tournaments. We've got the
Yeah, yeah,
Euros
yeah,
this year.
yeah.
You've
Yeah.
got international friendlies which carry absolutely no point whatsoever. No, I don't watch them anymore. You've
Right.
got those tournaments, and then you've got cup games. I mean, it could exceed 70, which is why I
Wow.
think Maurizio
Yeah,
Sarri said it best. Said that if you play about over 60 games a season, managers won't even have time to train or coach
true,
the players, which will make sure that the quality of football we'll have on display will be absolutely different from how it used to be about three
true,
years ago
true,
or 4 years ago. And
true.
I won't say it's an example, but we saw that Chelsea Man United game,
Yeah,
which was a
yeah,
terrible game of football.
yeah.
But I think it might make football, in terms of goals, we might be seeing more goals, but the
Yeah.
quality of football or the quality of players might well reduce. I mean, if you look at how many games Messi and Ronaldo used to play, they were
Right,
incredibly fit for two different reasons, respectively.
right,
And now you look at the best footballers in the world, Erling Haaland, Kylian Mbappe. Firstly, they're not as fit, and
right.
secondly, they're not as impactful at the highest level as those two were.
True,
So I think
true.
we will probably never see another Messi or Ronaldo in history again. I mean, specifically Ronaldo, because of the way he maintained himself with his fitness and everything. Even some like Ibrahimovic, who went on till
Right,
what 41 or something. Even some like Gigi Buffon.
right, right.
These players played till their 40s, especially the last two I
Right.
mentioned. I don't think we're going to get players like that anymore. The players are probably
100%.
going to retire early, pretty much like Eden Hazard
100%.
or players like that.
100%, man. 100%. Yeah, I mean, speaking of Eden Hazard or even say a Frank Ribery, those were the last few players who were classic trequartisti or proper
Yeah,
wingers in terms of Ribery. And gone are the days where you see a footballer taking on a man and beating him, or trying to
yeah,
dribble past an opponent, or like a number 10 find that pass which seems improbable. And
yeah,
that's the brand of football that our generation grew up on. That's something that we try to do in our grounds when we used to
exactly.
play, and fail miserably at it, but still attempt. Like for me, I'd always try to do a back heel because of Totti, or maybe like a L1 plus R shot of Del Piero, whose
Yeah,
jersey I'm ironically wearing, because those are things that you saw. I mean, say a Zidane or say a Dennis Bergkamp. Dennis Bergkamp was so skillful, and they would just do the most impossible thing. And you're like, oh my god,
exactly.
amazing. I think the way when Henry used to take a player on,
Exactly.
brilliant. I mean, so it's a whole different generation of footballers now coming
Yeah,
into the system.
we've got
But
this
I think
product. I mean, I'm not sure if you read Into the Mixer or not, which is a brilliant footballing book, and it talks about how football is now a product. So essentially, the idea is to make sure that you feed into your target audience,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and what you feed into your target audience has to be pretty much perfect in terms of
correct,
um, the product and the business that you're putting out. So managers try to be these control freaks, which is not bad, which is I'm
right,
completely fine with. But that completely, even though it somehow fascinates fans in terms of how they think intellectually about the sport, which is completely fine. But
right,
there's sometimes I just believe that, as you clearly mentioned, in this urge to productify the sport, they've uh, footballers are turning into athletes. They're turning into these marathon runners instead of pure street
yeah,
footballers. I mean,
correct,
if you talk to me about any street footballer now, I can. I mean, there are some in Serie A, say someone like
yeah,
Joshua Zirkzee or even Kucha Kvaratskhelia. I see the
right,
or Gianluca Scamacca for that matter,
yeah,
who
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
writing about. Who was just I was just writing about 15 minutes ago. So
lovely,
these are street footballers, but again, you look at the direction in which football is going. You think to come up with a system to make sure that you play around these players, you'll have a manager of, say, a Pep Guardiola stature would never compromise his system over one player,
right,
unless he's Lionel Messi, of course.
of course,
So, I mean, that's how. that's the state of the game we're in, where footballers simply have to be athletes. They need to cover what 12 kilometers a game, or
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
13 kilometers a game. Whereas, I mean, there is still room for natural instinct to be expressed somewhere on the periphery.
right.
But yeah, they need to cover
Yeah,
more
man. I mean,
ground.
I think the perfect example, of what we just spoke about, the two things is Pedri. I mean, he's young,
Exactly.
played like a lot of games, and naturally, he's a player, but does he get to express himself fully? I don't know. I
No,
still feel that he still can produce those magic moments,
yeah,
from the past.
which
But
he did.
I guess system is now king now, so. That's where, yeah. And since we spoke about Skamaka, I think is a perfect segue into the world of calcio, starting with Atalanta, and the world suddenly realizing that, oh, Atalanta does
Yeah,
exist despite being there for so many years and overachieving with Gasparini. I think the world finally took notice when Atalanta beat Liverpool in the Europa League away from home. How do you describe Atalanta, man? You've been covering them since years.
yeah.
Gasperini has lost a lot of players, but he's built again. What are your
I
thoughts?
mean, I always find it fascinating because Atlanta usually operate in threes. I mean, in terms of their front three, they always have
Yeah,
this front three who somehow turn into these household names for Italian football followers. We had,
absolutely.
guys like Luis Muriel, Papu
Yeah,
Gomez, and Jose Pilicic. We've
yep,
had like the current one. We've had Coop Miners, we have De Catalara, and we have Gianluca Scamacca. And
right.
that's how I think Atlanta operate, and it's very, very fascinating because they have this identity which they've been, pretty much um, playing with. I mean, over the last what 6, 7 years now, and I think since they have that identity, it makes them a sustainable club. Whereas you look at so many clubs in Italian football, say Juventus, or because Juventus lost the way
Yeah,
recently after that, um, after the previous Max Allegri era, where they
right,
continuously won leagues. Then they lost their identity, tried to stumble upon a new playing style or a culture,
right,
found
right.
themselves in a
Yep,
points deduction scandal. So I think Atlanta are probably one team in Italy who always had that identity. And that's made sure that they've always been sustainable since, I think this has been the case since 2016-17, where they actually were pretty decent in the Europa League as well. Although
yep,
they didn't go too far, but they had that playing style in them, which separated them from the rest. And they were like what seconds away from getting into the
yeah,
Champions League semifinals as well. And I think
true.
whenever Atlanta do it, you don't see it as an overperformance. When say Milan did it last season, it was an overperformance for me
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
the way their model, it's still sort of coming into the picture. When Roma
Mm,
did it in 17-18, I saw it as an
right,
overperformance. I mean,
right,
Juventus
right.
was different because it was during their golden era. But now I
Yeah,
look at Atlanta and I see them as the, I think, probably the only Italian team who've had a stable identity over a longer period of time. Inter will probably
true.
have that. Milan will probably have that as well now. But yeah, the sort of coaching they have under Gasparini, that always sets them apart. I think they have a tactical identity as well as an identity in terms of recruitment, which Milan don't have yet.
Yeah,
Um, Inter will probably have, but I think Inter's case is completely different. They could probably be under a new ownership in 2 months or something.
absolutely, absolutely,
But I
absolutely.
think that's why Atlanta always fascinate me. I think that's probably why Atlanta fascinate many fans out there as well. Fans in the Premier League or
True.
even elsewhere.
True, man, because being a Roma fan, we've both the brunt of even Duan Zapata and Muriel
Yeah,
just continuously scoring and winning,
exactly.
and and now they have Scamacca. So Scamacca, obviously, Roman born, uh, played in the Primavera, Lazio
Yeah,
Primavera, Roma Primavera. His father famously came into Trigoria and took the bonsai tree and broke it and
yeah,
stuff like that. So when Scamacca was obviously linked with a move back to Italy, Roma and Inter more than Roma were very sure that they're
yeah.
going to land him, but
I
he
did
ended
see
up
as if
going to
Inter will probably sign him, but not signing them was a shock to me.
Correct, correct. But he ended up going to Atalanta, and despite a slow start, now he has to be Spalletti's number one choice in the Euros, man. I mean,
Yeah,
there's no better number nine. And I think but it's there, but Skamaka has to start, man. I mean, he is
yeah. I mean,
probably the
I think
Italian
Skamaka is
Ibrahimovic, you can
probably
say.
exactly. I was going to say that. I think he's probably a very unique striker in terms of his profile. I mean, as you said, I think I had tweeted about this as well, saying that Ibrahimovic was a trailblazer in terms of his playing style. He was
Yeah,
tall, a street footballer who could actually head the ball. He was a really good goal scorer. He was good with his feet, could take players on. His linker
correct.
was excellent. We, for a long while, we didn't see players like that, and now we're
True.
seeing players of a specific, again, a street football identity who've
Yeah,
turned into what Ibrahimovic is. I think Alex Isak at Newcastle is another good example of that.
yeah, yeah.
Skamaka is, I think Skamaka does have his issues in the background, as you
True,
mentioned,
true.
the issues about his background and family and everything.
Yeah,
And he played through injury at West Ham as well, so he's got fitness issues. But I think
yeah.
he's I think still for me, despite his bad spell at West Ham and despite the fact that he's sometimes inconsistent, he's for me I think one of the most complete strikers in football right now
True,
when he's
true.
playing and
Absolutely.
firing. And as you
Absolutely,
mentioned,
man.
that Ibrahimovic comparison stands out, and
True.
I'm a massive Ibrahimovic fan as well.
True. So moving on to the second team who's impressed everybody and has caught everyone's eyes, Thiago Motta's Bologna. And off just before you started, you were mentioning that you write a lot about Bologna. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming that you follow them closely. How have they impressed you this year?
I mean, quite a lot because honestly, I saw Thiago Motta at his previous clubs at Spezia and even before that, I think he was at Genoa as well,
Yeah,
where
yeah,
where I couldn't really see him impose the sort of identity that he has now.
right.
So it made me realize that maybe he's trying to deviate away from what he was known for because you saw a lot of stuff being written when he was in charge of
272.
us. Exactly, when he was in charge of the PSG under 19 saying that
Yeah,
272. So I knew for a fact that it was not a vertical formation, it was more of a horizontal representation. So
right.
he didn't quite do that at his previous two clubs.
Yeah,
And I was constant. I mean, I remember tweeting about this a couple of years ago back in 2022, saying that even though Sinisa Mihailovic did a really good job at Bologna, I thought they always needed the sort of manager who could play a very high pressing and attacking brand of football, which Mihailovic did to an extent. But I thought they could always make that step up because they had that. I mean, if you look at Bologna, even before the Saputo era, they had that recruitment in place where they signed really lesser known young players from across the world. Guys
absolutely.
like Tommy Asu, I think Mitchell Abisher arrived before the
Yeah,
Saputo era as well. They
right,
always had that
right.
identity there. I mean,
True.
Arnautovic was an outlier. Let's not go there. It
Yeah,
was a completely
yeah,
different move. I mean, they always had that identity in place, which made me think that if they hire a manager of the Morta ilk, I didn't mention Morta at that point because he was not really up there at that point.
correct.
I did write about De Zerbi, but that's when he actually went to Brighton.
Right.
I always wanted Bologna to hire a manager of that type, and that's happened now, and they've built on that. And I think that's again, as I mentioned about Atlanta, I think Bologna will probably carry on with this identity as well because
100%. And do
it's
you see
it's
them retaining the players like Joshua Zirkzee or Ricardo Calafiori next, or even Thiago Motta for that matter is linked away. What do you think
I
is going
think
to happen over the summer? And what if say Motta moves, which is the ideal club for him to as a progression?
I think Motta's probably going to Juventus. I mean, I'm not saying it's the ideal club for him, but he's probably going there, which we all, as a Serie A community, would probably hate. But I think he's probably
I mean,
going to
he's an
Juventus, which
Interista man. I mean, Interista going and
yeah,
managing
exactly. Yeah.
in UA.
And I think Louis Ferguson unfortunately picked up an ACL injury
They
yesterday,
picked up
which
an
can
ACL. Yeah,
keep him
yeah,
out for 7-8 months. But otherwise, I thought if Motta was going there, which I think 90% he probably is to Juventus, Louis Ferguson's going to go there, and Calafiori is going to go there. I'm not sure about Ferguson anymore because of that injury. I
yeah.
think, I mean, Juventus did a weird sort of inquiry about Joshua Zirkzee, which was really funny that they, instead of talking to Bologna, they talked to Bayern Munich saying that please sign him. for his buyback, so we can sign him for about a cheaper price than what Bologna will
Right.
sell him us to for,
Right.
which is a very Juventus thing to do from the
So
Beppe
very
Marotta
Juventus.
playbook.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In fact, just to go older, I don't know when back when there was this what was it? What was it called? The co-ownership. When it was
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So I remember Giorgio
Nainggolan,
Chiellini.
Berardi, and everyone.
Yeah, yeah. So I remember Giorgio Chiellini, a young
Yeah,
upcoming defender. And Roma, his agent said that, in the auctions, co-bidding thing, whatever,
yeah.
that, he's going to be for Roma. And then suddenly you have Livorno striking a deal under the table with Juve. And he
Pretty
ends
much
up
like
going to
that. Yeah.
Livorno and then signed by Juve. So
I mean,
it's
I
not
thought
surprising at all.
there's teams like Arsenal, Milan, Tottenham, or maybe even United looking at him and probably speaking to Bologna. And I thought it's actually a smart approach because a club like United or Arsenal or Spurs will probably go to Bologna and say, we want to sign him. And Bologna, seeing that it's a Premier League club, will probably ask for the same
100%.
that Atlanta asked for Rasmus Højlund. They'll say,
Yeah, yeah.
they'll name a namesake price, say that's we want 75 million. Juventus will, in the meantime, be talking to Bayern Munich, will sign him for 40 million and then say, we'll pay you 55 million, and that's it.
True, true, true. And
Which is a very
what I
smart
love
thing
about
to do.
Joshua Zirkzee is that he's such a modern striker, man. I mean, he's
Exactly.
got
Yeah.
he can play as a number nine. He can hold up the ball. Lovely to watch him play. As obviously when not against Roma but against the other 18 teams, it's good to see
Yeah.
him play like that. And I
I mean,
hope they make it into the Champions League because the way that it's going, I think Italy will get the fifth place in the
yeah, they
coefficients,
should. Yeah.
and it'll be
I
good
think
to see
on Zirkzee, I
Bologna
think
in the Champions League.
he's more of a number 10
Yeah,
than a
yeah,
striker. Because I think
correct.
the next club that he joins, Juventus will probably try to play him as a centre forward,
Yeah,
especially under Max Allegri. I mean, obviously, Motta's going to go there. But
correct.
if, say, Zirkzee ends up at Bologna, Juventus under Max Allegri, that's pretty much the end of his top flight career because he's going to play him as a striker, thinking that he's a proper striker. Whereas I think Zirkzee is more of a Harry Kane sort of striker who's not got that passing range,
Yeah,
but he's more of that. I mean, probably Karim Benzema sort of
and
football. I
his
mean,
his
there's
ceiling is so high right now. I mean, there's
yeah,
so much for him to grow into. And as a Romanista, I hope Calafiore comes back to us since De Rossi is back, and De Rossi and Calafiore have a relationship from the past
yeah,
when he
yeah,
broke his feet. De Rossi was the first one who went to the hospital. And
yeah,
speaking of which, you've seen how Roma have been under Jose
yeah,
Mourinho for the last 2.5 years. And quite similar to Thiago Motta as well. When De Rossi managed Spal, maybe he didn't have the players to implement
yeah,
his ideas. But now he's at Roma. Suddenly, Roma have regained the enthusiasm. Roma
yeah,
playing football. La Magica. The reason
exactly.
why us Romanisti fell in love with Roma is not because of the trophies, just the way that Roma played. So how do you see De Rossi coming into the fray, and how exciting has he been for you?
I mean, I love it because honestly, I won't say I predicted it, but it's like it's happened before with the anti-Mourinho
Yeah,
catharsis, let's call it, with Solskjaer. Didn't quite happen with Ryan Mason at Tottenham, but
right.
we know that things obviously improved from there on, be it in the short term. So it's not completely new because it's like uh, Mourinho completely has this perception about his teams when he's leaving that this lot is completely useless.
Yeah,
Whereas a young manager comes in, I think whenever Mourinho's left his clubs, the last three clubs, he's come up with this narrative saying that we don't have defenders. That even at Roma, I mean, at Roma, the argument was fairly true,
true.
but the way the new managers that come in try to tide over the problem is that they play a high defensive line, which makes sure that the individual load on the centre backs reduces. They're playing more as a team because of the high defensive
Yeah,
line, and there's less reliance on specific individuals, which is what annoys me a fair bit about Mourinho and his league form. I think he's more of a cup manager now, which is why he should be managing international teams now. But I think De Rossi, I think the best part about De Rossi is that he did that, and we could see a new tactical attacking identity in the very first game,
yeah,
where Angelino had that blinder where he played more crosses than Spinazzola can play in his entire season,
True, true.
and he played like a modern day fullback where he was dropping deep often as his third centre back and the other
Yeah,
fullback bomb forward. We saw that in the very first game, and that's actually carried on. And we had these. I mean, I remember being on another podcast before the Torino game, I think, and before the Inter game, in fact,
yeah,
or before the Torino game itself. And I remember talking about how difficult a test Torino will be because they play a different brand of football
yeah,
where they come at you, they press high up the pitch, and then they score much more number of goals than Verona or Salernitana can do.
yeah,
But that's not quite what's happened. They've come up with the right sort of solutions to play against the teams that um, Mourinho's team like playing against, because they exploited those spaces on the counter attack, and Roma do that now under De Rossi as well, which
yeah,
is very promising. Which tells me that, and De Rossi knows English, brilliant English, which is really good for his future. I'm not saying
yeah,
he's leaving Roma or something. He's probably signing a new deal, but it shows that pretty much like Mourinho is really good with connecting with a lot of his players. Because Roma as a club have a lot of multicultural players.
yeah,
Chris
yeah,
Smalling, Tammy Abraham. You've got players who are not Italian
yeah.
but from somewhere else
Paredes,
in Europe.
Dybala.
Yeah, and De Rossi's actually played at Boca Juniors, so he knows the language from there as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So he's proficient in multiple languages, and that matters a lot. I
yeah,
remember watching that interview in English after the first leg against
yeah,
Brighton. He spoke fluently. I
yeah,
didn't expect that. I mean, I only
yeah,
remember reading on La Gazzetta dello Sport that he speaks English. I couldn't really believe how well his English was because he's never
yeah,
played outside Italy apart from Boca.
yeah,
So I mean, it's really promising because it's something that Roma need because look at how American owners operate, how
yeah,
Bologna operate, how
yeah,
Atlanta are essentially American as well now.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Even Milan
Milan as
and
well.
Fiorentina, the way they
Yeah,
operate is that they have this identity about how the game should be played. They have a specific sort of model about how the game should be played, a recruitment structure in place, as I mentioned, for
yeah,
Atlanta, signing those lesser known players who fit the identity of how the coach will uh, teach the game to them, coach the game to them. I think Roma will probably use the same identity now, which will make
true.
them a sustainable club. And they won't rely on individuals, which was the case under Mourinho, regardless of the fact that Roma won a trophy and all of that. And they reached a European final, which Mourinho will tell you about for the next, for eternity, probably. Um, and it's that under Mourinho, you used to see that there was an excess amount of reliance on Paulo Dybala.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
Dybala, no party. That was pretty much it when it
pretty
comes to
much. Yeah,
goal scoring. Now you can see that there's an attacking plan in place, and it's not reliant on that one individual who can conjure up some magic like he did in that game against Feyenoord in the
yeah,
Europa League.
yeah.
I mean, I'm still of the opinion that if not for Dybala, Roma would have not gone past Feyenoord or would have never
100%.
reached the semi-finals, because that
100%.
goal is probably one of the best Dybala goals I've ever seen, and the most
100%. I mean, a fully fit
pure
Dybala
skill.
and Roma play like, a top team,
Exactly. And it
Yeah,
was probably one of the most pure, skilled Roma goals in recent memory for me as well.
yeah.
Roma, I
In
mean,
fact,
it
just
was good
just a
to rely on
very
that.
interesting, sorry, just a very interesting snippet that came into my mind suddenly is when you're mentioning, I remember when Cengiz Under came to Roma, De Rossi was the one who integrated him to squad because
Yeah,
a guy comes in, he doesn't know how to speak English. He's only fluent with
it doesn't
Turkish
matter.
because he's not from Istanbul or a big city. He's come from a
Yeah,
small village in Turkey. But De Rossi is the guy who, got him, introduced him to the
yeah.
local Turkish population in Rome. All of that. So, and another player
Despite
who's
probably not knowing the
tremendous.
language himself.
Yeah, yeah, despite not knowing the language, yeah. And another player who's drastically improved under De Rossi is Paredes. Under
Yeah,
Mourinho, he looked lost, but under De Rossi, he's, probably playing the best football of his career so far. That
yeah,
unrealized potential that he always had, because I remember him as a young kid in Roma,
yeah,
and then moving on to Zenit and then PSG, but never really reaching a potential. But I really feel that, he's become the conductor in midfield.
yeah. I thought he was always that. There was a period at PSG where I thought that he's one of the most potent players to break a press. I
Yeah,
think this is probably under Thomas Tuchel when Marquinhos also played as a defensive midfielder at PSG.
right, right,
I thought Paredes wasn't always reliable off the ball, but he was always really good on the ball when it comes to dictating play or breaking through an opposition press. Say if an opposition is pressing you, Paredes had that one pass in him which could break that press. I
right.
thought he always had that. Under Mourinho, there was not really a build-up phase in
Yeah,
the very first phase where
yeah,
Paredes could drop in as a centre back, receive the ball, turn and pass it to whoever was making those runs forward. We have that now, and I think that helps any midfielder. Apart from say someone like I mean Scott McTominay is probably catching strays here for no absolutely no reason, but but I thought Paredes somewhat had it in him. He was probably suffering under Max Allegri, who we already sort of criticized for
oh yeah, yeah,
destroying
yeah.
these
I mean, I think,
technical players.
yeah, yeah,
It was unfair on
100%.
him the way the Juventus spell sort of panned out. There was some disturbances. The relationship broke down with Allegri when Allegri actually saw him as his personal midfield choice at the
Right,
very end of the window. They signed him, and Allegri didn't know how to use him. It
right,
was almost as if he's an alien in that setup. But I'm so glad that De Rossi is bringing the best out of him because I thought there was a template of a good player there in terms
right,
of
right.
how he was on the ball, at least.
Right. Right. All right. Lastly, we'll just quickly, end this podcast and, move on from here. How do you think, now the second leg is upon us in the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. So what are your expectations with the Italian teams remaining there? Roma, Milan, all Italian clash, Atalanta with that advantage, and Fiorentina, 0-0, I
Yeah,
think, in the first leg
yeah.
as well. What do you see happening in those competitions?
I think unfortunately for you, I see Milan going through, and the
Milan are
reason
still
for that is
favorites.
yeah, and I think the reason for that is today a fairly reliable reporter at the La Gazzetta dello Sport reported that if Pioli loses and if Milan lose, Pioli is probably going to lose his job. And as soon as you see these rumors come up, Milan turn into prime Man United under Sir Alex Ferguson, and they turn into the best team in Europe. And it's a
Yeah,
very well-timed brief from Redbird at this point. So I think even in the first game, Roma did miss one big opportunity to
yeah,
make it 2-0.
yeah,
Um, I somehow believe Milan will turn it around, be it an extra time or normal time. I think Fiorentina will probably reach the final once again. I mean,
yeah,
that's sort of a given. And because again, it's again probably a well-timed brief from Fiorentina and Rocco Comiso because Italiano is probably leaving at the end of the season and
yeah.
they're
He is
still in two
probably
top competitions.
right.
And they can still qualify for the Europa League or Conference League once again. And it'll be a very good farewell for him to at least to win one piece of silverware before he leaves. I think for the Atlanta game, I think Skamaka spoke about it after the 3-0 win, saying that it's not done. I I have this inkling that Liverpool will probably score 2 goals or something early on, and then they'll have this heartbreak of Atlanta coming back and scoring 2 goals on the counter attack, just as we saw in the first leg.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think Atlanta will have a close one in the first half, and in the second half, once the game opens up for them, as soon as Liverpool start to look for another goal, we'll have that familiar triumvirate up front, combine and score a goal or two, and then Atlanta will be through. I think sadly for Roma, and I
No,
don't
I mean,
want De Rossi to go out, by the way. I want De
uh,
Rossi to go through, and I want De Rossi to win the Europa League so that you know the reason. You pretty much know the reason why. So the Mourinho,
100%.
that that narrative that Mourinho won everything, made Roma
Yeah,
relevant again. I want that
yeah,
narrative to simply go away for now.
true.
That's simply not true. I want that to happen, but the way Redbird have planned their brief about Pioli leaving at the end of the season, Milan turn into prime Barcelona.
Absolutely, man. I mean, it was genius of De Rossi to put El Sharabi on the right to
Yeah,
stop Leao and Theo Hernandez in the first
yeah,
leg. But I've been maintaining the same stance that Milan are favorites to win this tie overall. But I'm happy to play the underdog and wait for something to happen. But realistically, yeah, I think that maybe it'll be a bit too much for De Rossi this time around. But one can hope, one can dream, and I can, I was actually I dreamt of an all-Italian final between Roma and Atalanta when the draw came out.
Yeah.
So maybe that could happen. You never know, man.
And actually, before
But
the draw came out, I thought we'll have three Italian teams in the semifinals, which I'm not sure when that happened before, but yeah, they got Liverpool and the two sides. I thought only one Italian team is going to progress after the draw, but yeah, this is still better than having one. Worse than having
true.
three, but yeah, I'm happy with what
I
I'll
mean,
get.
we had three Italian finalists last year, and none of them
Yeah,
won. There was heartbreak, like literally heartbreak, man. I mean, I was hoping that at least we would have two or three winners, and it's not like any of the teams played poorly as well.
I
All
still
the
blame
three teams.
Lukaku though.
Yeah, man. I mean, you can say that, but that Europa League final gives me a lot of
Yeah,
PTSD. I still haven't gotten over it for a while now. I mean,
Europa League
be it
finals and
that game,
PTSD. Don't tell me about it.
be it that game, or even the Man United 7 Roma 1. I remember watching that
Yeah,
in 2007 in a hotel room somewhere. I was traveling, and I just couldn't believe what was happening. But like, I don't want to open that Pandora's box for now. All right. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Kaustubh, it was fantastic. We finished like 41 minutes of recording,
yeah,
and time has flown by, literally. And there's so much more. I mean, we haven't even got into your favorite Italian team, Fiorentina, or the how competitive the relegation clash is, barring
yeah,
Salernitana. It's very competitive. Anyone can go down, including Sassuolo, who themselves are a
yeah,
whole different topic to speak on. But we'll do that soon. Thank you so much for coming
for
on.
sure.
And it's great to talk about calcio. And hopefully we can do this quite often. And we can
Definitely. I
also
mean, I can do
maybe.
this all day long, but we don't have time now. So
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for everyone
thanks a
who's
lot.
tuned
Thanks
in.
for having me.
And I hope all of you guys like, share, and subscribe the usual, and share it with all your Italian football fans or whoever's trying to get into calcio. This is Kaustubh Pandey. I'm Ajay Menon signing off. Arrivederci. Buonasera.